South Africans who've been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic could soon be allowed to access money from their pension funds. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni announced yesterday that the National Treasury is continuing to have conversations with business and the unions on the matter at Nedlac. Mboweni says workers should be able to access a percentage of their pension fund in this time of difficulty. Well, joining us to discuss this issue further is Craig Gradidge. He's a retirement specialist at Gradidge Mahura Investments. Craig, thank you very much for joining us. Now, do you think that this is a good idea coming from the National Treasury, given the fact that we know that South Africa is not very well known for its savings inclination?
Good afternoon, Nompo. Yeah, I think government finds itself in a very difficult position in that, COVID significantly impacted sectors of the market, some sectors of the market more than others. So as a result, you've had people, in various sectors of the economy who have really struggled to try and get, or to earn a living, or to make a living, or to continue earning a living. And yes, one can argue that if we access our retirement savings, mathematically it adds up that we are not going to have enough for retirement, or we're going to have less available for retirement, and we're going to interrupt the power of compounding in the process. But it's a very difficult time for a lot of people who, struggling to make it through today.
Yeah,
and do not have a concept of retirement to worry about at the moment.
Yeah, look, the points that you make are fair. There are lots of arguments for currently and against. But how best do you think that we should do it if we're going to go down that route, such that people don't end up spending bulks of their pension funds on fancy cars rather than things that they actually need?
Yes, so that's the difficult bit, and I imagine that is where the discussions and the negotiations are stalling. It's one thing to be able to allow people to access these funds. It's a very difficult thing to control what they then do with those funds. So, these negotiations have been ongoing for a while.
Yes.
It wasn't something that just came up recently. In fact, I thought they'd fallen off the table because it had taken so long to get any kind of update.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult. I think that's the importance of people getting advice, so that, as an advisor, I can sit with clients and show them what it means to take a certain amount of money out of their savings and how that will directly impact on the quality of their retirement.
Yeah. So let's assume that people are able to get access to part of their pension fund and they use that money for the right things, but they create that gap, like you say, and they also interrupt the process of compounding of their investment. Once they get back on their feet, what would your advice be? Of course, you'd give each client bespoke advice, but generally speaking, how then should you try and catch up on the gap that you've created by withdrawing from your pension?
Yeah, so that will be the challenge for those who decide to access funds from their retirement. Is then when, they're employed again, when they're earning an income, will the budget be able to carry extra savings and additional savings to fill up the hole that they've now created by taking money out of their retirement? So, it's an issue of mathematics. It may provide them an opportunity to restructure their savings. So, you've had tax-free savings accounts coming into the market in about 4 or 5 years ago now. And so some people may be able to use extra money to access those benefits of having tax-free flexible money, so that, they can perhaps rebuild their contingency savings, so that the next time there is a crisis, the next time they're impacted by, the serious financial event like COVID was, then they would have restored their contingency savings, their emergency funds, and be able to live off that and leave their retirement savings, whatever savings are left behind, to continue growing.
Yeah.
So I think it does present an opportunity for people to reset and to perhaps, to quote Biden, is build back better and put a better plan in place after that.
Yeah. Now, we know that prior to COVID, the South African economy was already in fairly dire straits. We still had the high unemployment problem, the issue of inequality and so on and so forth. Government has been having this conversation around preservation of pension funds and sort of postponing it. So now we're at this stage where we're talking about the possibility of accessing our pension funds, and at the same time government saying that we should also move towards preservation of our pension funds. It's sort of like speaking at opposites, really. Your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so look, government has been bringing in new legislation as part of the retirement and savings reform process that started, almost a decade ago, if not more than a decade ago. And their intentions were pure, in that they recognized that people were accessing retirement savings every time they changed jobs, and people were, kind of gaming the different kind of funds relative to each other. So, opting to have provident funds instead, and then accessing all their retirement savings at retirement instead of buying an annuity with a portion of those proceeds. So government has correctly been working on the structure of the industry, having the right incentives in place, making sure that providers were not charging too much money. These were all part of the problem, which was resulting in people not retiring with enough capital. So when you have an event like COVID that comes along, and people are out of work, people can't get money, 350 Rand a month it's really not going to cut it. It's not going to make a difference, to many people who then have retirement savings sitting in a retirement annuity or a preservation fund or somewhere. And, if they could access some of those funds, it makes a huge difference to them today. Then they're not selling off their property, or selling off cars, or taking kids out of school, and other sort of dramatic interventions. So, I don't envy government. The COVID has presented a significant challenge to them, and I think this is probably just a hiccup in terms of that ongoing retirement and savings reform program.
Yeah, one last thing, Craig, just your advice to those of us who are fortunate to have still held a job during the COVID times. If the opportunity is presented to people who are employed, who haven't lost their jobs, would you say that the best thing would be not to take the opportunity of tapping onto the pension funds because we haven't been adversely affected like others who've lost their jobs due to COVID and maybe even the unrest?
Yes, if you don't need to take them, then the advice certainly is to leave those funds exactly where they are. The power of compounding means that the market pays for your retirement. And if you interrupt the power of compounding, you then have to pay for your retirement out of your pocket. Okay, so it's a very important concept for people to understand that, rather get the market to pay. So you pull out 1,000 Rand a month from your pocket and let compounding provide the rest of your retirement capital. But if you're going to interrupt compounding, you're going to have to then be taking out 4,000 or 5,000 Rand a month to make up and fill up the hole that you've created by taking money out. So understand the power of compounding. Your returns in a retirement product are tax-free. So, and that improves that power of compounding even more. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
And very lastly, you mentioned tax-free. If people do tap onto their pension funds, once the government opens the taps, what are the tax implications?
We'll need to see if there's any sort of kind of concession provided, but certainly we expect that it'll be the withdrawal tax table that would apply. So that tax table has been in place for many years now, but it would be interesting to see if there's some sort of concession where government says, as part of a one-off sort of agreement, you can access tax-free. So those details is what we are waiting for from government and from Treasury in particular.
Craig, thank you very much for your time and your tips there. Craig Gradidge, he's an investment and retirement specialist at Gradidge Mahura Investments.